Hello everyone and welcome back to Mentos Plays Our Darker Purpose. I apologize that my voice is not going to sync up with what is on the screen at all, because as you may be aware from my last episode, my audio got messed up somehow, and because of that, we had no way of actually recording. So right there I was just picking which floor I wanted to go to. I ended up choosing Sensitive, because I felt like the Sensitive floor would give us a better chance of getting through it without as much damage, simply because I would be killing the enemies faster than I would otherwise. I apologize if my commentary turns out to be a bit more disjointed than normal, because I am not focusing on the game quite as much, and I am not used to this style of commentary. So obviously, since we just got to Chapter 3, there is a vastly different group of enemies here. These little flowers that shoot out the persistent bullets. We've got this champion up here who shoots out music notes that I later learned confuse you when they hit you, which is of course very painful. This was actually a very important pickup, I believe, when we got this juice box here, because, you know, health gets a little bit scarce when you're fighting against a bunch of enemies you don't know how they work, and you are not exactly in a great position. A lot of the enemies here take a while to get used to, but these gifted enemies aren't really all that bad. All things considered, they were not that difficult for me to take on. I think the bosses were rather tough. The enemies themselves were rather tough, but by this point in the run, we really put together a very, very good set of items that'll help us out. You know, not to mention some damage stuff, but as a whole, we just have a group of items that allow us to do a pretty good amount of damage. So, you know, the benefits of dealing with a sensitive floor are definitely there, and the gifted enemies aren't nearly as hard seeming as they actually are when we get to the next floor where we are not able to have a sensitive floor. As you can see, we almost take out that champion in one volley right there, and this is one of the harder types of enemies I actually ran into. Even here in this part of the video where we were just facing off against him on the sensitive floor, I thought that he was very difficult. So this item here that we're about to pick up is plus 20% range, which is a good addition to the range that we already had. This run we got a lot of range upgrades which are helpful. Also here, if we look, we are going to end up buying out this vending machine of everything it has on offer, except for my manuscript. The my manuscript item is decent, but I kind of felt like the goblet was more valuable to me at this point than my manuscript. The reason being, with my triple shot when I'm standing still, and every enemy that I'm running into firing projectiles, it seemed a bit more reasonable to stick with an item that would allow me to do something a little bit more than what I normally do. You know, my manuscript does do a decent chunk of damage, but it's also something that would override my shots and make my range irrelevant. And so I decided to stick with an item that would allow me to abuse my range and still get a little bit of a benefit out of it. Although, I believe on this floor or next floor, we're actually going to get rid of that. But for right now, I am stupidly walking around these statues that are spinning rocks, because for some reason the thought never occurs to me that I am able to destroy terrain and could easily just, you know, blast them and get rid of them. This is a relatively easy room, because there's a nice little safe spot to stand on both sides where you can just avoid things. And of course the music notes we have are very good for taking out the enemies from a distance there. As soon as we roll, we open up a chance for ourselves to do a little bit of damage, and that does real well. Also, I should add that I am, like I said, I'm doing post-commentary because of the technical difficulties. So I'm recording this all in Audacity. I'm not sure that I'm going to be the best at getting the audio levels as balanced as they should be. And honestly, my laptop is not the best at rendering, so it takes a crazy amount of time to actually be able to, you know, do a test, so I'm gonna try to do my best. Also, I should add that I do have, my girlfriend is online and we are talking. So I am a little bit, some disjointed commentary is due to this being post-commentary. And here we have a choice between negative 20% attack speed for plus 2 juice box capacity or plus 50 life. I went with plus 50 life. Later on, I kind of questioned that, because I think when you get higher juice box capacity, it also gives you the juice boxes to fill it. So we would have actually had 2 extra juice boxes for that, which is a total of 180 extra life we could have restored. Or I forget how much life exactly it was at this point, but I think it was actually like 120 life restored. So it definitely would have been more valuable. But having the higher part also allowed me to be a little bit less concerned when I got up toward higher health. But yeah, so that was kind of one of those decisions I could have gone either way on. I think that the juice boxes might have been a little bit more valuable, but not a whole lot. And as I was saying, I am, in the meantime, chatting with my girlfriend, so I have time to actually record this commentary. So some of the disjointed commentary is coming from my, not being used to this style of commentary, not being able to quite as easily grasp what I'm doing in the game, and properly, commentate on it. Part of it is also because occasionally I'm flipping over and typing out a response, and that makes it a little bit harder for me to think of what to say. So if I recall correctly, we are about to head to the boss. This boss really does a number on me, I believe. First time I've seen this guy. So we start out with all these eggs here, and then suddenly Giant Bird. And Giant Bird starts firing little red birds at us. Now, of course, this is a sensitive floor, so we're taking extra damage, but so is the bird, and we're getting triple shots. Eventually he does start to do these little patterns where he has these lines that show his trajectory, and he swoops across the screen. Very easy to avoid if you know what you're looking for, and very much something that, the hardest part of this fight, to be honest with you, is the fact that throughout it all there is a very heavy wind mechanic going on that does prevent you from quite so easily being able to move at your own free will. There is a whole lot of difficulty involved in just moving around in terms of this boss. But we managed to beat it. We walked out with 63 health and 3 juice boxes left, which isn't great. Long talon marks are sometimes visible in the dirt on the terraces, as if a huge bird of some sort had swooped down and snatched something up from the gardens. Shrill hunting cries echo down from above the clouds. For this reason, students are particularly wary of early evening recreational periods. More nonsense and rumors, the administrators say, and we are increasingly disappointed by your cowardice. Now a moment of respectful silence for the 6 students that disappeared during outside time this week. I made a point of reading the lore on these guys, so I will jump into that and do it, obviously, and do my best to keep up with it. So here we actually didn't have a choice of which floor to go to. We only had one choice, which was a well-stocked floor, which isn't a bad thing. Certainly the ability to get an extra vending machine is something that will almost always pay off when you have a decent amount of credits, and due to us getting that 45 token item, we were actually very well off in terms of tokens. That was a bad dodge, but it didn't hurt us too much. But 3 juice boxes left, we're at 97 health. We aren't in the best of positions either. Now we're going to be fighting this champion in a room where he is not sensitive. So this guy gives me a lot of problems here, if I recall. We're going to be running from these giant pink balls. He's going to be shooting more mini ones. We're going to be shooting at him. And actually, no, we got through this one pretty easily. So here, I'm all excited. We get the bubbles, right? Yay, bubbles! Unfortunately, our shots destroy the bubbles upon the time that they are fired, and that item is pretty much useless through the entirety of the game. It's usually one of my favorite items in the game to pick up, but I don't know which thing it was about the build we have going, but something just completely prevented it from being able to actually do anything. And so here we're going to be fighting off against another one of these mech dudes. He gets a lot of those giant pink balls on the screen on us. We do manage to take him out pretty quickly, but then we have to kind of adjust and get rid of all those giant electricity balls. in order to be able to actually pick up the item he dropped. Give me 1 second while I take a drink. So things aren't going too great for us at this point, but they aren't going too bad either. You know, 3 juice boxes isn't a bad problem isn't a bad thing to have. That is, you know, max stock when you're first starting out the game. So, not really bad. We're gonna go after the flower first, because those projectiles will be annoying. And then I realized that this leader here is actually causing it to be windy, much like it was on that bird fight. And this room tears me up like fucking crazy. Apologies for my language there, but this room was so incredibly frustrating to try to get through. I'm not sure how to go about doing this well, but I mean, this was one of the hardest rooms in the entirety of the run. And here we pick up the Sindar's time key, which is going to allow us to slow time on use, which slows projectiles, slows enemies, slows their attack patterns. A very useful thing to have, really. So these guys that fire the little shots aren't that bad, although I am taking a lot of damage on this room. And we're very close to the point where I'm going to be wanting to use my... Oh, actually I did just use my last juice box. Debated picking the goblet back up there. Wasn't sure which one I really preferred, but I did end up sticking with the time key. I felt like the goblet was decent, but not that great in terms of helping us out long term. So we have another champion here, another one of these mortar guys, who I am about to learn fires balls of ice, which of course, as is the trend for balls of ice in this game, they explode when they hit something and they shatter into pieces. And we get a new item, Gonrol's Mallet, which gives us 25% more damage while we're holding it. So there is actually no on-use effect for this. I tested it out right after getting it there to see if there was an on-use effect as well. There isn't, but that 25% damage is a huge increase, all things considered. When you're suddenly doing 125% damage, that is something noteworthy, and I end up keeping this item, I believe until the end of the run that we got going here. I know this looks rather easy at the moment. For being Chapter 3, I expected it to be a little bit more difficult, I think. But what we've got going on so far hasn't been too difficult. We've been taking a lot of damage, but, you know, we got 2 more floors going on before the end of the chapter if it holds up to the standard that has been set by the previous chapters. So, you know, we're in a position where it's possible that we could keep going long enough if these enemies are all we have to deal with. So we're going to take on those little artillery guys and keep moving our way around. If you remember, this is a well-stocked floor, so I am going to be keeping an eye out for any more vending machines. But at the moment we are going for any vending machines, I should say, but at the moment the key is obviously to get rid of these enemies as fast as possible, abuse my triple shot and my item there, and here I'm able to just open my way right to this chest, get another juice box empowerment. One of the major things about having that power perk is the fact that those chests that have mazes around them, we don't have to worry about getting damaged in because we don't actually have to do the maze. It is certainly one of the more useful things. It is certainly one of the more useful things that you are going to run into in terms of perks from a practical standpoint. Also, it should be added that that enemy just dropped a juice box. That's always, of course, very important. So here we have this candle that increases light radius and a thing that makes enemies become light sources. Instead, I empower my juice boxes and get 2 more, bringing us up to a total of 3, which is pretty decent. Of course, earlier in the run we did get that item that gave us plus 50% healing on juice boxes. So every one of those juice box empowerments, instead of being 5 health that they add to the juice box, is actually going to add a total of 7.5. So obviously those are useful. My original thought had been that maybe I should just go with focusing on juice boxes from both vending machines, but what kind of swayed me was the fact that as we go through these last few floors for the chapter, we're going to want our juice boxes to be as valuable as possible. And you know, a couple of more juice boxes is valuable, but if we can increase, this is increase move speed by 30%, decreases light radius, slows enemy use. Instead I go with the empowerment and as many juice boxes as I can afford, which I believe was only 1 or 2. And now we fight off as this guy, Leafy Oversight, who is really a deceptively simple boss. But yeah, these pods that he has going, at this point I kind of start to ignore them because I am not entirely sure what they do. Then I start to realize that they actually spawn into these little flowers, and suddenly they become much more of a concern, and I'm not quite as able to focus on the boss as I was at the early part of the fight. This guy is definitely an interesting boss because it kind of forces you to try to balance your time between the enemies that he's spawning and himself in a level that a lot of things don't. We're gonna see in a second here. There goes one juice box, which is up to 90 HP healing now, which obviously is quite a huge amount. So these guys are gonna start throwing a bunch of shots at me. I'm not sure. The achievement for this boss turns out to be letting him absorb a certain number of spores. I'm guessing that means you have to stand at an angle where the spores are shot and then you dodge them and they hit him. I'm not sure how it works, but I am going to have to do some experimenting if I want to unlock that one. But yeah, as I was saying, I decided to stick with going for more of the empowerments. So there goes that boss. Edgewood's groundskeepers are responsible for controlling the flora on the terraces and guaranteeing that receptional areas remain accessible. Nonetheless, a scheduling mishap due to preparations for last year's Fall Frolic resulted in one garden disappearing from the maintenance rotation. This same garden, however, remained in the planning documents for the Spring Melt festivities. The first students through the gates were those leading the Moonlight Lantern Parade. The administrators later commented that, while the tears of tragedy sting, we can at least take comfort in the fact that these children were celebrating a season for flowers. So yeah, 6 or more spores absorbed. I'm not sure how that goes about happening, and it's something I'm going to have to experiment with in order to get 100% in this game. And then we move on to the Weeping Repositories. I'm going to read this flavor. The staircase ahead leads to a library floor. Before the disappearance, these areas were strictly off limits to students. It's said that the creaking bookcases above can rearrange themselves, and that menacing things stroll through the stacks. Only one Edgewood student ever requested library books from her teachers. Apparently those requests were honored, doubtless due to unfortunate and outdated contractual requirements in the school's charter. Inky liquid drips down the steps ahead, suggesting that your caring friends may be waiting for you. Perhaps they really did come here through a chalkboard accident of the Capulets, or maybe they were invited by a higher presence, or perhaps they are simply a result of your rather uninspired imagination. Who can say? You should ask them, if you're not incinerated in one of their void zones first. So now we get to choose a perk. As I lay dying, I get stronger for 10% attack speed and 30% more damage. I actually missed what other perk I got right there. But yeah, I think if I recall correctly, it was one that was going to lower my attack speed. And that was not something that I was willing to do. It had a decent perk attached to it, but if it was going to lower my attack speed, I would have rather stuck with the one that was less directly useful at most points and more useful in terms of actually allowing me to do a little bit more. So here I tried to fit through those books and had some trouble. I ended up destroying them. I was a bit worried that by way of, if I didn't have the power, I was kind of curious if I was going to be able to fit through there. I think I could, but for whatever reason it gave me some trouble when I was trying to get through there at that point. So instead what we're going to do is go with the one that, you know, under 10% health I don't really want to be ever at this point. but it's also not so bad of a bonus even without that. And it does give us an advantage, you know, if we get into a later in the game point where our health is low because of drastic enemies, we are going to have a little bit better ability. Now there I walked out of the room and back in. That was for the sake of removing the projectiles that have been spawned by that enemy and allowing myself to focus on clearing out the room and getting through it without worrying about dodging the fire that had been circling around. Overall, this floor is full of a lot of really well-designed enemies that are very, very creepy. And things get a lot harder at this point in the game. A lot harder than they had been. So what we got going on here is we are going to mostly be focusing on clearing the floor. One thing that I learned a little bit later in this run, or at least put together in my head later in this run, was the fact that there aren't any champions of these enemies. So a lot of the time I spend here I am clearing the floor. Part of that is looking for more juice boxes. Part of that is for more, I'm losing my train of thought here. Part of that is for I was hoping to run into a champion and be able to pick up another item. So yeah, a lot of what we got going on here is a lot of enemies. I had some fun shooting these book piles because they are so many separate books that my shots kind of bounce around like they were playing Breakout, and that was very fun to me for a while. So, you know, I kind of did that for a little while, which was rather pointless, but it was fun. Yeah, a lot of the time we run around these floors, part of it was looking for juice boxes and tokens and vending machines and all, but a lot of it was focusing on trying to find an item which we were going to be able to take advantage of. That never did end up occurring. Sorry, just writing a rather longer message. But yeah, a lot of it is actually rather pointless, because without champions spawning on the floors, there's really no need for me to explore quite everything. Of course, getting extra drops is also beneficial in its own right, and is certainly going to help us out throughout the remainder of this run. But, you know, it's also not necessarily the wisest thing. So these guys get really annoying when they're coupled with the flame dudes, the little hopping things. On their own, they're not so bad. But when you have to deal with the flame guys who you're trying to kill as fast as possible to prevent them from spamming a ton of fire, those little hopper dudes and their projectiles can get a bit hard to keep track of. Give me one more second while I take another drink. This room gives me a lot of problems. At first I didn't notice that the little shadow dude wasn't spawning. That wasn't him that was shooting the projectiles at me. He was actually spawning attacks at a distance. It took me a while until I ran into him over here to realize I had been attacking the wrong things, and that's why I didn't have any progress. I actually for a second thought that he was that those weren't actually an enemy, that they were just a sort of new trap. And so I kind of had to keep an eye out for that. But eventually I realized the door was closed and found him and got out of there, of course. So I'm moving my mini-map a little bit because this floor is big enough where it actually got itself off screen again. One thing, later floors I could see myself removing the mini-map from the corner, just playing with it off. But it's not that obtrusive, all things considered, and we do get a vending machine here where we're going to buy a single juice box. The broken mirror is a very good item, at least if it is still as I remember it from the pre-release. But the juice box is important for us to survive, so we go with that. But yeah, we do end up with a little bit of a situation where we're trying to, here we go to the boss, Dr. Bloodfather. So part of the harrowing moments of this run, not only from the fact that, you know, we just don't have the best of stats, but I actually miscounted the floors. I thought this was the 4th floor of Chapter 3, and I thought that this was our final boss, so to speak. And so I spent a lot of time on this boss, considering my juice boxes to not matter, and to be able to just face tank it. But yeah, it was the 3rd floor. If you've been keeping track, this was the 3rd floor of Chapter 3, which I will realize immediately after beating this boss, thinking I have completed the chapter, and realizing that no, I haven't. And I put myself in a very bad position. Because I use up almost all of my resources fighting this boss, including one that was a miraculous heal where I just happened to use it at the perfect time. But we do end up beating him, and we are able to move on to the next floor. Dr. Bloodfather was originally responsible for teaching several of Edgewood's chemistry seminars. After a series of mysterious and scarcely self-destructive experiments, however, he scarcely resembled a teacher at all. The administrators turned a deaf ear to early complaints about his underlit classroom, obsession with blood, and ominous name. The missing student, lab assistants, were harder to ignore. However, as was the way that his left hand had detached itself from his arm. The administrators, weighing the evidence, promoted him to Dean of Sciences. Some find it disconcerting that Dr. Bloodfather didn't disappear with the rest of the faculty. Admittedly, his classes generally end less than a month into the semester when all the students go missing. So here's where I'm realizing my mistake, and there is a staircase in front of you with a door at the top. It looks ominous. You have no idea how much damage you have done coming this high. Can you feel it in the bones of the school? From the cracking that echoes up from below the cellars? From the way that the building sways from side to side? You believe that you are capable of mercy, that you are only defending yourself. Instead, you are going to destroy us all. And you're going to hurt someone else, someone you've never met, very badly. You have always scared us more than the other two. Initially because you were... I forget one word, but then even more so because you changed. So that's kind of saying, like, that segment is almost like the school or the administrators themselves talking to you. And essentially what they're saying is Regan and Goneril, they were scary because, you know, they had a lot of abilities. But Cordy was scary because she was her. And even more so because she managed to become something different. Because when the school collapsed, she was no longer the same as they expected. So this floor doesn't really offer us up any new enemies. We're going to be facing more of the same enemies as last floor. But it is certainly... that guy got an attack off for the first time. It was definitely something that I wasn't expecting. It did some damage. And of course, with only one juice box to go, that worried me a bit. Managed to take out this guy relatively quickly, but did take a couple hits from trying to stay still, and then realized that there was a second one up at the top. So I mean, if you've been following a bit of the lore throughout the videos, I know I don't read all of it, although I do leave it open a little bit, so if you care to pause and read it off that way, you can. But if you've been following the lore, essentially, it seems like Cordy has become something that the other two leaders could not. She's become something that has adapted to her situation instead of trying to maintain her status quo. And that makes the administrators even more scared of her than anything else. So here I'm just kind of trying to look through the darkness, looking to see if there are any juice boxes laying around. I am about to, very shortly here, do something very foolish if I recall. So I'm gonna keep an eye out for that, and I'm going to call it out when it happens. Um, but yeah, that should be coming up relatively soon. I should add, I talked about it in the original recording of this, but the music in this game is absolutely phenomenal. From backing, I do have a copy of the soundtrack, which is quite fitting for a lot of stuff. And the boss music for most of the bosses in general is just absolutely incredible. So minus 20% move speed for plus 2 juice box capacity versus 10 damage, and drinking juice boxes increases damage permanently by 3. I take the damage increase. Again, I question my decision if I should have gone with the plus 2 juice box capacity, but I felt like the attack speed would pay off more than that. We're going to be going through a lot of rooms that are pretty similar to what we've been experiencing here. But, you know, right now a lot of this is going to be very similar. I believe it's actually maybe this room where I almost make a horribly fatal mistake. I am trying my best to survive here, taking a ton of damage on this room. And as you heard, I almost let myself run completely out of health before I noticed it. And so I come up here to the top and we find another room with a chest in it. So I destroy my path in there. I'm still going to take a couple hits on the spikes because I am bad at this game, but yeah, we do end up getting a little bit more dodge chance. But again, we took 20 damage to get that, and that 9% dodge chance, who knows if it was more valuable than the 20 health we just lost trying to get it. So I'm going to leave this room here, and we're going to come over here to the left. Oh, no, that's the boss door. I cannot explain how, like, shocked I was when I looked and realized I had almost just walked into the boss door. So I buy another juice box here because I need the health. But, yeah, we almost walked into the boss door, and that's what I meant by the almost fatal mistake. Because there would have been no hope of us having a fight, even putting up a fight against the final boss, if not for me noticing that at the last moment. There was still a lot to try to find on this floor. I wanted to try to explore, trying to find some juice boxes or more items. And it would have been rather foolish for me to jump into the boss, a boss I'm not familiar with, before exploring the entirety of the floor for as much as we could get. Here I have a little bit of a range, enough range to make that more viable. I have plenty of room to dodge in terms of getting away from his shots. I do make a focus on getting rid of that guy as close up as possible to hit him with as many shots as possible. Get another token in here, which brings me up to 3. Of course, that means I'm 2 tokens away from getting another juice box. We are going to fight off these little dudes here. I actually do quite well at this point in the run, in terms of avoiding damage. It's been a few rooms since I took any hits, which is not something that can be said very much for my play so far here in late Chapter 3. I've tended to take quite a bit of damage, but in these last few rooms, I've managed to hold myself pretty steady in the health department. So we come down to this room where there are more fire throwers and a bunch of these little skeletal birds, which can't do a whole lot. We do get another coin, which puts us one step closer to another juice box. And that leaves us with one more direction to explore before we have completed the floor, and we have no choice left but to go fight the boss. So we are going to walk our way in here. Another one of these flame-throwing dudes, another one of the shadow guys. And I believe it might be this room where I first take damage for the first time since deciding to explore the rest of the floor. Maybe. No, actually, looks like we got out of here just fine. I thought I took damage in here. Maybe I just didn't take any damage anyway. My apologies. So I roll around searching for any sign of juice boxes, coins, anything. Head off to the right here, where we run into a couple more of these dudes who have the attack that I wasn't familiar with, and there's some damage taken. The flame-throwing plant dude's not so much of a worry when there's not much else going on. I actually took damage to one of those flame-throwing towers, which is rather disappointing to me. But I clear out the room just so I can look about it in peace, looking for any more items. So I believe that between the tokens that we got and the juice boxes we found, we do end up with a net gain in terms of health. I mean, we've only lost like 24 health thus far, which isn't all that bad, all things considered. But at the same time, I mean, we're dangerously low on health. We only have 3 juice boxes right now. We've explored every room but the boss room. It's not a great situation to be in. But I look at my stats here real quick before we go fight the boss. 173 to 182 damage, 2.2 attack rate, 30 crit chance, 94 range, 40 light radius, 15% resistant dodge with a move speed of 375, and no chance at all of getting a level. But we do have enough money to buy another juice box. So when we enter into our boss here, the final boss of Chapter 3, we are going to have 360 health worth of healing on top of the 47 health we already have. So that's not a bad situation to be in, but it's also not the greatest situation to be in, let's be honest here. So I do buy this last juice box. I've got 2 chalk which do have healing for me, and I preemptively use 1 juice box, not a second because it could only heal for about 78 out of its 90, and now we're off to fight the administrator, who takes me a while to learn his patterns. So he spawns in these portals here, and this first run I didn't actually put together how exactly to handle the portals, but really this is the hard part of the fight. For the most part, the main version of the boss isn't so bad. We did get a lucky dodge there. I should add that this music is probably my absolute favorite in the game. It is so good. But yeah, the actual main part of the boss isn't all that much of a threat, but this part, especially before you realize the pattern, is very difficult. What I ended up learning was that you had to shoot the, it was on this one here that I actually figured it out, is that you have to shoot the one that's firing the papers, because the other ones will spawn an enemy when you hit them. So we end up going through. I finally figured it out, and that makes things progress much quicker. And I'm going to try to stop and fire as much as I can so I can get the triple shot in. But of course, I also don't want to stop too much because he is quite fast and makes it a little bit difficult to get away from. So each round of this, he's going to spawn more and more of these portals. And of course, when the musical notes come out, we risk getting hit by confusion, like we did on the last part there. And that's obviously not a good thing for us. So we're going to continue fighting off this guy. We're actually doing rather well, but I mean, health-wise, we're getting low. I popped my last juice box right there, putting us at 184 health. You know, we're 30 shy of being at a full heal. But we did get a lucky dodge there, but then we get confused, take a couple hits from that. We're going to go up here to try to find out where the papers are coming from. Our music notes actually take care of that one for us, which actually happens a few times. Surprisingly, they never cause enemies to spawn. I'm not sure if they're actually set where they don't affect the portals that come up from otherwise, but I mean, we're taking a lot of damage. We're down to 81 health. We've already lost 100 health since using that last juice box. Things aren't really looking up for us at this point. I mean, all things considered, we're not in good position to try to beat this boss right now. But we take out that portal, he comes back. I use a chalk cloud and try to use it to heal, but of course the damage that he's doing to me from walking into me is actually hurting me more than I'm getting healed. So when he spawns the next portals, I accidentally spawn an enemy who does immediate damage to me. I drop down to 11 health. I get a lucky dodge. The only reason I survived, I actually hit E instead of R for the chalk. Yeah, I accidentally hit E instead of R for the chalk. So I almost died by not spawning the chalk cloud in time, but that dodge chance we had just saved the run by making me dodge what would have been fatal damage by pure chance. So we got very lucky there. I should have been dead at that point. But we managed to survive, and now we're almost through his health. So I just keep backing off, and with that, we defeat the administrator, and I throw my arms up in joy. And I probably screamed in your ear there in the initial recording. So on the bright side, that didn't happen. The administrator melted into the floor, and a moment later, rolling papers filled the room. Cordy leapt and rolled, trying to dodge the pages that threatened to envelope her. I made that mistake in the first one, too. "What have you done with the teachers?" she asked, shouting to make herself heard over the rustling. The administrator's answer seemed to come from the building itself. "The teachers? You dare ask what we done with the teachers?" Now the books were detaching themselves from the wall. A heavy volume caught Cordy in the shoulder, almost knocking her down. "We have no idea what happened to them," the voice said. "Something destroyed them and ruined us all. They are similar to us and with the same responsibility. One task that they accomplished through kindness and we accomplished through fear. Which is to..." Cordy didn't hear what the administrator was going to say, however, because something huge was bouncing toward her. It was a bookcase, catching the wind and spinning as it came. The last thing she thought before the corner struck her was that it looked familiar. And thus ends Chapter 3. So that's going to wrap it up for my commentary on this. I want to make sure I cut it a little bit before the end of the episode so we don't run over. Thank you guys for watching. I apologize for the video yesterday not having sound, for this not being narrated as it was initially. I hope it was still enjoyable to see my first victorious run over the administrator. It seems like I played pretty well that time, I have to give myself credit for. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This is going to run off with a little bit of me searching for different upgrades I can do, trying to decide what to do. Take care, everyone. I will see you next time, and have a good one watching me find out what to do here. Later, everyone. Bye.